Hello, welcome to the Point News interviews. And today it's good to have Channy Crossfire. Hi, how are you
Hi,
doing?
good, staying blessed. Greetings from the States. It's afternoon here in the West Coast.
Great. So I've prepared good questions for you today for our conversation. And the first one is about social disparity. What are the causes of social disparity across the world? Is it feasible to resolve this issue?
The first thing that came to mind when I read that question is classism. And that's something that happens all over the world. It's when the more richer people, and corrupt government uh, tends to exploit um, their own people's resources, and usually the lower class or the more impoverished and oppressed people, and usually also exploiting resources from other countries. And I, yeah, it's feasible to resolve the issue. There has been, I haven't done a deep dive on this, but definitely a slight dive that there are billionaires and trillionaires in this world, and if if they're able to distribute their wealth, and and have a more even playing field, there will be enough resources and enough shelter and food to help everyone. But again, this ties into this generations and centuries of like bad karma, ego, and greed, you know. So yeah, if I had to keep that short and simple, so that's one of the main causes of it, aside from the psychological mental health factors. But I mean, it's all connected, and there's a root cause and effect of everything. But it is tied to, again, imperialism, colonialism, and just exploitation of resources. And like, for I can't say too much with other countries, but I do try to keep tabs on how they're all connected and all these patterns, and trying to break certain toxic cycles, and at least for this country in the States here that I currently live in, um, it's again classism and prejudice and discrimination and privilege and people being sheltered, not enough education. And when you connect that, there's a reason why they're trying to ban and restrict certain books and certain education, because they don't want us to think for ourselves, to not be a sheep, to not just be a soldier and always saying yes to everything, you know. Um, but that's what liberation is. Liberation is tied to freedom. And once we liberate our mind, we're able to help liberate ourselves and our communities, our families, and one another. But yes, that is definitely one of the root causes of social disparity, is taking away our resources, our natural resources, like water, privatizing all that. And there's so much to this. And I try to when I try to talk to my friends and family about this, I start small, start little, plant the seed, because there's so many layers to this. People who aren't used to these types of conversations and topics, they'll get overwhelmed, you know? And it takes years and generations. And I hope this, just like my generation, I learned from the generation before us, and hope we pass down what we learned to the next generation, and as we become more and more free and more liberated. And change is a good thing, as long as we make it positive.
So, what could people do to solve this issue if they would stick together?
Hmm. Let's see.
There any
That.
maybe ideas in
Mhm,
your mind that what should be done?
mhm. That's definitely a big social experiment. And then with this recent quarantine and pandemic with COVID, is such a good example of, you know, a lot of us were pointing fingers at one another and being stuck in that cycle loop of blaming one another, that blame game. But that's a trap. That's a big ego trap that prevents us from um, that problem solving thinking that we need, for growth, for change, for innovation, um, for inventing things, problem solving, how to help better our lives in a good way, in a more conscientious, mindful way. And I think as long as we take our ego out of it, think of the bigger picture, think of our friends and family and their safety, instead of just fear mongering, instead of just only doing things based out of fear. Because there's a difference between being safe and fear. You would think that when you take fear out of it, you're safe, right? But what we need to learn to train ourselves and one another is, as long as we come from a place of love and hope, then we could actually help one another better our society, better our communities, have better family dynamics, and that's how we could really take care of one another, as a village, you know, um, yeah, be more family oriented is one of those uh, good values and tradition that we should pass on. You know, if that helped answer your question.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. It is. The idea of ESG principles is currently gaining traction with more individuals discussing sustainable development. What are your thoughts on this topic? How can we cultivate ecological consciousness?
Okay, I admit I definitely had to look that up. And yes, that's something I like learning something new every day. So definitely from this, I learned ESG means environmental, social justice, governance. Uh, and oh boy, all right. So I know the U.S. Was the only country during the previous, uh, uh, the previous Trump administration during quarantine pandemic was the only country that opted out of the, I forgot what environmental agreement that every other country, um, in solidarity, had that common goal and moral and ethics with, you know. But it makes sense not to justify this country for not doing it. Um, it's just again like I when you see patterns to things and how things correlate, cause and effect, you have a better understanding of the root problem. And if you have better understanding of the root problem, you're able to make more sustainable, dynamic changes, more long-lasting changes, right? So yeah, this is one of the biggest countries in oil exploitation, and still running on fossil fuels and gas, and a lot of motor companies, since industrialization, um, has been rooted here. So of course, a lot of that big money, big oil, like General Motors and certain uh, gas has a lot of ties and really bad, negative agendas in regards to that. And I'm not going to go into a deep dive in that, but so one of the I see a yin yang to everything. There's always a trade off to everything, right? Nothing is completely ideal, but there are silver linings to things. So one of the good things here is that people are investing more in solar panels when they can. when they have the funds and resources to. That'll help with solar energy, um, and decreasing the amount of electricity we use here. And there are more, healthy options in regards to food. People are becoming, well, it is a first world privilege here, I admit, to be able to opt out of not eating meat and food compared to other third world countries who aren't able to have those types of resources and options. But again, silver linings to things. That's uh, like I myself am eating more plant-based meals to help reduce my carbon footprint, right? And little sustainable things even at home. Um, like I know a friend who came from a restaurant industry, and she only has cloth towels at home, no paper towels, right? Nothing disposable, less waste. And she only has those towels for everything, to wipe down, clean, and rewash. And just using less plastic. Like you can ask some of my vanilla friends. Like I sometimes I try to like cut pieces of plastic straws, when I think of like sea creatures, and then tearing those plastic those plastic wraps that hold cans together, little things like that will help. Little like those little things will go along the way when, especially helping animals and uh, sea creatures, and thinking thinking of things, thinking of other living creatures and people outside of ourselves, you know. And then other little things, it's just litter. And it just really depends on your attitude and if you're being positive about it. Because it makes sense if you're cynical and a little jaded, um, you might not think any of those things matter, you know? Um, but what kind of life is to live like that uh, when you don't feel that even the small things you do will have an effect? Like it's almost like the butterfly effect, or creating like positive ripple effects. You know, you create like a good positive chain of events. And one of the things I like doing is like I've been able to support so many small businesses. So there's that as well. You know, just being a more conscientious, mindful consumer. You know, and especially when I started waking up to all these like atrocities and all these like evil and greed of these big corporations, I'm more careful on buying more groceries, than eating out. And groceries are more sustainable, but even then, being able to plant and grow your own food, and that's another thing. I try to raise awareness, especially with indigenous people here. And they're one of the longest lines of protectors of this land. They're one of the very first generations of people that learned to live off the land, but because they respect it, it's. And I'm spiritual, so once you make those connections, you're tied. Everything has a life force. And um, when you take care of things, when you respect it, when you honor it, when you respect and honor life and death, um, I think you would be able to have a better appreciation of where your food comes from, where it's sourced, who actually grows it, with agriculture and the farmers. And I'm glad to be able to support when I go out to farmers markets sometimes, my local farmers markets, and directly support the farmers and growers as well. It's little things like that. And and those little victories, those are examples of things I try to do uh, that'll help, small businesses and families, even just teaching a young generation um, those values and importance of that, because we do take spices and ingredients for granted. We do take basic essentials for granted, like water, um, and even like indoor plumbing for granted. Just certain things in this country, just I do acknowledge, first world privileges, and teaching others, that we still have more compared to other third world countries. And it's what I preach, or with my personality and how I perceive things. A lot of my answers are just more mindful, intuitive, and more spiritual. And that really is a connection to the environment and Mother Earth and Mother Nature. We can't sever those ties. We can't be in denial that there is no connection to that. Because a happy earth with happy soil, we're able to grow healthier food. And we're not going to get into GMOs or Monsanto, and um, there are pros and cons to all that as well. And life expectancy, and the pros and cons of having better, like, instant gratification of food. But what are the sacrifices? What are the costs of that? And how the states, America, North America, United States, is the country with the biggest obesity, epidemic. And that's tied into, the the meat industry here as well, and um, the really shitty healthcare system here as well. Just a slight dive. So I hope that answered your question.
Yes, totally. It's actually really great those small steps that are you that's you're doing about supporting businesses and all those uh, steps towards ecology. It's really great. How do you think why a lot of grown-ups are behaving irresponsible towards environment? They're
I think,
not even kids. I mean, I'm not
mm,
talking about kids. So kids are. It depends on parenting. Yeah, how we
mhm,
teach them to behave with towards ecology, environment, to keep
mhm.
it clean, to not litter it. So, how do you think why? A lot of grown-ups are they're really behaving irresponsible towards it and they're littering environment. Why is that happening?
It's not just one answer, of course. It's not an overgeneralization. It's kind of a case by case basis. But of course, those collective actions are creating consequences. But it goes, just to name off the top of my head, um, it's upbringing as well. If your parents, friends, or family aren't able to be a positive example to teach you how to take care of your environment, you know, it's like, do you know how to take care of your own home, your own space around you? How to clear old energy, and how to re-energize. Uh, it could be that type of negligence. You're taught negligence, so you're not taught to anticipate the needs of others, or how something can negatively impact things around you. Um, you just have my voice right now. My light's kind of going out. But anyways, so there's that. Not having a positive uh, influence in your life to teach you all that. In a good way. And then education as well. If you grow up in certain cities, certain areas where they're pushing consumerism and waste and instant gratification and one-time use things, you know, if you have the privilege to just buy so much waste, and I think it's people like me who have to learn to be resourceful. When you're on a budget and you can't afford to just um, buy like everything you want whenever you want, right? You really have to like budget and plan and try to save, in the long run. Um, but I think people who are privileged enough and sheltered enough don't have to worry, usually don't have to worry about those types of savings or expenses. So they're more negligent and they're more wasteful and they take a lot of those things for granted. But yeah, and again, it goes back to pride and ego and greed. Um, just some people think they're too above, uh, they're too above all that. It could be classism as well because usually like upper class, the elites, or the more corrupt, privileged, sheltered people, um, they usually have other people that take care of the waste for them. That usually picks up after their messes, that cleans up after them, that tends to their needs, for them. So I think usually for them, for example, they don't have to think ahead. They don't have to think um, about those connections and about caring about those things. But it's usually the people in the front lines, in the trenches, and doing the grunt work that has to think ahead and that has to think in the long run, for their survival. You know, so it goes back to that as well, like the privilege to not think about survival, um, and how not to save resources, right? And then the ones who don't have that privilege and based on survival have to really plan and budget resources and save resources and make things last. So that also gives another perspective on that question.
Right.
Yeah.
Um, you mentioned education. That's really important part. Mm. What do you think about the worldwide accessibility of education?
Ooh, we that's another yin and yang trade off, right? It's good that that invention, is innovative. We have more information at our fingertips, you know. I mean, that's if you have Wi-Fi or data, of course. If you have access to that in the first place. Um, but the yin of that, the con of that is, people can be overwhelmed, and if you're not taught or careful about where you focus your attention to, you'll get misinformation, you can be brainwashed, uh, so yeah, that's the yin and yang and pros and cons of that as well. We have so much information but not enough guidance on where to look for these resources that we actually need. And I think that's another thing too about the generation after me, the younger generation. Um, they that's another thing too. They could be so overwhelmed with everything right now, but they're also the most woken up and the most educated, and the people right now that are mostly trying to vote and using technology and social media like TikTok. Um, to try to raise a positive voice. But that's the thing too. It's really how you approach things. It's really the narrative that you put out there and the rhetoric that you put out there um, is really crucial. You know, so we do need more level-headed people like us to raise awareness about things and to remind people to have a common ground. Nothing should be put on a pedestal. You know, and yeah, so like I call myself a positive influencer. You know, there's just so many topics and social justice issues to talk about, but they're all connected. Like if I could have a big wall of like red ties or red strings, it would fill up the whole the whole wall. Um, but I'm really proud of people like you and I forgot his name. He reached out to me online on Twitter like years ago, maybe a little after quarantine or right before quarantine pandemic. But at the time, I didn't have um, the resources and attention span at the time to finally conversate with him. But I've always remembered him in the back of my mind, you know. Um, and I'm an activist too, and in my vanilla life. So this is definitely something, just us having this conversation gives me hope, and it's also one of the things I'm passionate about. And I'm so glad there are people like you too in the world that are willing um, to like listen to your heart and your gut, and to do something that even if your friends and family are skeptical of and are critical of, but it makes you happy, like it keeps you going, right? I think I
Thank
went
you.
off a little tangent there with the question. What was the
That's okay.
question again?
Thank you for saying nice words. Actually, I'm really grateful. Um, yeah, let's go back, move on.
Mhm,
Go back to education. Actually, there's a
mhm,
question about that. Yeah, how may people from poor countries get an education?
mm,
I guess we still have this issue that in poor countries they can't get good quality of education.
okay. Yeah, and to digress before I forget, uh, ooh, actually, okay, yeah, my attention span right now. Um, yeah, we we call them poor countries, also known as third world countries, or countries that are usually exploited, especially by first world countries like this U.S. I'm gonna disillusion, um, the United States of America. That country's put on a pedestal. We have like the biggest ego and pride, and one of the most like centuries and generations of bad karma, right? Um, but yeah, it's hard for third world countries and poor countries to have those resources and access to that, and that is done most of the time in a very intentional, strategic way by the industrial military complex, for example. Um, it's usually to destabilize, uh, those villages and those towns, usually to exploit.
You're frozen. You're breaking up. I'm sorry.
Oh, could you hear me? Could
Yeah,
you hear
now I
me? How
can
about
hear you.
okay? Yeah.
For instance, about the poor country, we can take Africa. They're having
Mhm.
lack of education, right?
Yeah, and again, that is tied to classism and colonialism, and I can only do a slight dive. I would love to have a deeper conversation with someone there that also lives there and their own exhausting experiences from there as well. But as far we can only speculate. Um, but of course, they have history of apartheid and segregation as well, and even their own struggles with liberation and freedom and having their own rights. As we're speaking, there are multiple wars going on, in different countries, and again, it's just tied to exploiting resources and oppressing people. Um, usually the more richer, sheltered, privileged people that want cheap labor, to fund their companies and their corporations. Um, but yeah, with education, um, I think that's why it's so important that we start off small, have little schools, uh, little pockets of like yeah, little schools and educators. Um, I know they're it's just to keep certain not occupations, but have to still uphold the value of medicine men, medicine women, the elders, um, and teachers that are in their communities and villages as well. Even if they don't have degrees and certificates, even if they may not come from other countries, to also help provide resources and certain techniques or skills that might, help better their way of living, in those rural areas. Um, it's good that we try not to because again, for example, I come from Cambodian roots, and it was just my grandparents and my parents that are also war refugees. And in Cambodia, with Khmer Rouge, a lot of the doctors, educators, people that were thought to be dangerous because they were smart and critical thinkers, they were killed off. A lot of records of art and music and culture were destroyed, because it's going to liberate people and give people hope. And that's something that most dictators and most oppressors don't want, is to give the people masses hope, for change, to revolt and to revolutionize, and to fight against the status quo, or stand up for the status quo, or the matrix, whatever you call the antagonist of the story is, or the antagonist of the greater good. And I think so. Yeah, aside from taking care of our elders and the medicine men, medicine women, that is part of the culture, and that usually has years of knowledge from the land, right? That could help heal families and individuals and the community. Um, I hope that we also continue to have certain humanitarian resources and nonprofits and organizations and aid to help bring about, uh, um, again, resources and knowledge and skills to help better the lives of people. And that's another thing. There are U.S. sanctions that are going around in other countries right now, preventing, like, having these blockades, preventing access to medicine and um, things, resources that we take granted here in the United States of America. Um, and just not going to a deep dive, but certain countries are being blocked off, access to that, and that is a big humanitarian red flag. Obviously there are corrupt, evil forces that don't care about mental health and community. They just want to continue the cycle of trauma and generational trauma, and that's one of the roots in Africa right now, is also centuries and generations of trauma, and that is tied to not having a lot of access to education, you know,
All right.
and that ties into more slave labor and yeah, the civil war is going on too in multiple countries.
But can online education platforms assist with this issue of accessibility?
Oh, hell yeah. If you're able to have access to Wi-Fi or internet connection or data, then yeah, that's one of the really good things about online courses, online schools, and online education, is you don't have to worry about logistics, right? And traveling outside of home, you could learn from home, like working from home. One of the good things about that. But again, there's always a trade-off to everything, right? There's always a pro and cons to everything. And even here in the States, there are some pockets in the country, where it's so rural. It's not like a tourist city where you just walk into a corner store and just get access to Wi-Fi, right? Some people don't have the privilege, uh, or being able to afford to pay for Wi-Fi as well, and they have to go into those stores for Wi-Fi, for internet, to get their schoolwork done or homework done. That still is happening in certain cities and places here in the United States of America. You know, um, but yes, that is one of the really good things about online education, and if especially with quarantine and the initial pandemic a few years ago, that's definitely a testament um, to electronics, technology, still being able to connect um, to other people and still be able to, grow our mind and to still learn, to still cultivate and stimulate our mind, is such a crucial thing to learning and growing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good thing. Have you experienced some kind of online education, some courses maybe?
Oh yeah, definitely. Like I did used to go to a lot of night classes back in college, uh, but also uh, it was um, it was also convenient to take some online classes as well, and that's also good too. When you're feeling sick, and we know very well in the United States that there isn't a lot of good sick leave. There isn't a lot of good policies and legislation in place that'll take care of you, you know, um, uh, when you're sick from work or even sick from school. You got to catch up on your classes and your credits. But online classes definitely are, they're good for that. Um, there's definitely good convenience with that. Again, you have to travel and you can still uh, take care of your grades even when you're sick. Just need to do
Yeah,
that at home. But again, with the initial quarantine and pandemic, that was a very good example of that. People
yeah.
on Zoom and yeah, on their
That's a
laptops and
that's a
computers.
great opportunity for people who cannot study outside of the home.
Mhm.
Um, and besides, in Africa, I think is also dealing with this issue with the internet. They're having troubles with the connection.
Mhm.
But besides that, yeah, they're having a problem like hunger in Africa. I want to discuss that topic. How can we deal with the food crisis and help impoverish the African countries? I think this is a
Yeah.
really basic topic, it's like, oh,
Oh my
but
god,
it's a
it's
big
a
topic.
basic
It's
topic,
like, it is.
but it's so loaded. It's so loaded because we know there are layers to it. You and I have the emotional capacity and maturity and critical thinking and intelligence to know that from point A, B, and C, that we have options and solutions um, to help take care of this problem. To help tackle this. But again, it goes back to uh, these big corporations around the world that don't want to distribute their wealth and resources, and they're uh, there are studies and statistics that do show that there is enough like wealth distribution for to end world hunger, and it's just been centuries of that. Um, yeah, and then again, it goes back to centuries and generations of trauma and bad karma and colonialization and then exploiting resources. Um, like uh, if we aren't able to, I mean, even if we aren't completely able to get rid of a problem um, in our lifetime, we can still take actions. Um, the little things to help, in our lifetime, and then help teach the next generation, maybe in their lifetime. Um, but I think realistically, just each generation, every generation, I think is just learning, growing, getting better at problem solving, for our communities and the world, and even like domestically, the country itself, it is trying to live off the land, or having things be more communal or more sustainable. People could live. Families could still um, n- not just survive but thrive, right? Depending on the organizations and resources that's available there. Humanitarian organizations or certain embassies, or other countries being able to send and give resources or allocate money and resources to help those organizations there, you know. Uh, and then another option. I mean, hopefully all this just happens simultaneously, right? Not hopefully not secluded from one another, and not happening separately. And then it goes back to policies and legislation, and then who's your representative, and then what politicians are there, who's actually advocating for the people, um, and so that's another thing to look at as well. Um, just holding ourselves accountable and holding the people in power.
How can influencers, current opinion leaders, and bloggers assist in solving societal problems?
It's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Just having these types of conversations, raising awareness, encouraging each other, learning from one another. You know, oh my God, there are still countries, certain societies and cultures where females aren't allowed to speak their mind. There are still places where they don't have freedom of speech, So that's also a privilege that we're able to have and have this safe space to do. And that's another thing. It's also acknowledge that and raise awareness again on how we choose to approach a subject with our narrative and rhetoric, not to scapegoat anyone, not to blame anyone, but how we can take a step back and learn from our mistakes, how to break the cycle of trauma or break toxic habits, toxic um, things that are making us go backwards and not progress in a good way. And yeah, it's and again, like we know very well, uh, algorithms online with technology is a huge factor. So where you place your attention to, you'll get that feedback whether you want it or not. But I think it's being able to teach ourselves or teach one another how to critically think. Like what do you think is right or wrong? What feels right? What feels wrong? How can we teach ourselves and one another to be better at listening to our guts, our instincts, and our intuition? That's something I would like to have deeper conversations on, because that's going to tie into how we interact and have certain relationship dynamics with ourselves and with people around us, and even with those that. So, oh my gosh, I've since I've been in this specific industry, I've been able to travel so much in this country, and I've been able to meet so many people with so many different stories and experiences. And that's another thing too. Um, if you're able to get out of your comfort zone and have more life experience, meet those that are different from you, you'll be able to still learn and gain so much insight to so many things you thought you knew. And I think that's very crucial. And that's why a lot of people, um, it could be, to not their fault of their own, not to blame sheltered people or privileged people. Sometimes they might not have the opportunity to step out of their comfort zone or have certain life experiences. Maybe they're not that adventurous. Maybe they're not that curious. Maybe they're too comfortable, you know? Um, but I found that when we're able to have conversations like we are with people that we don't know, you'll be surprised at what you would have in common and what you could relate to, you know? And then, when you go back to school, when you go back to your home life, when you go back to your family, um, back to your hometown, um, like you take pieces of people that you meet along the way and you think of them, you know, like certain topics, certain stories, you start associating with them. And I think that's what we need more of. Um, Sometimes we're too used to the same familiar people around us, um, but most of us will be able to learn and grow when we when we meet new people, learn new stories, and have more fresher perspectives. Um, it'll help give us more epiphanies. Because the opposite of war is creation. I forgot where I got that quote from, but as long as we stay inspired, as long as we try to cultivate a problem-solving mentality, how to do this better, I think there's hope. Yeah, as a humanity, there's still hope.
Do you believe that people should get together?
It depends. It depends because there's so many types of personalities. Um, for the greater good, yes. Uh, I believe majority of people are inherently good. We just learn to do wrong things or bad things. But people do deserve second chances and
For sure.
right. And of course, case by case basis, there's so much more to it in regards to morals and ethics, and then people have different morals and ethics. And but I think what we do have in common is survival, trying to live and see another day. And if you don't have people to protect, um, uh, then that's another thing too. Like most people, the good of humanity usually comes together because there are people that we want to protect, or animals or creatures that we want to protect. You know, not all of us have maternal instincts or paternal instincts. Maybe that wasn't cultivated or nurtured. Some people lack that, but it is better late than never. If you could learn that, you could be taught that. You know, there's still hope for that. Um, I think people coming together will only be constructive and good and positive if there's still a willingness to communicate, uh, in a good way. Um, if there's still a good amount of open mindedness, that's the only way people can come together in a constructive, sustainable way. So, there's, uh, not to get into a deep dive, different archetypes with different personalities, who's level headed enough, who's diplomatic enough, um, who knows how to de escalate, um, who knows how to redirect things to focus in a much better way. Um, but yeah, that's kind of a loaded question. But yes, people should ultimately come together for the greater good,
Yeah.
nonetheless. You know.
We're all human beings, and I think it's necessary for people to be more communicative, to be
Hmm.
more kind to each
Hmm.
other, and we have to stand together.
Hmm.
That's one of our missions of our project, is to get people together.
Hmm.
That's important.
Oh yeah, definitely. I remember thinking in initial quarantine and pandemic, I'm an introvert, so I didn't mind being by myself most of the time. I didn't have a problem with that. But what I realized is I did miss live music, concerts and festivals. But as an introvert, it says a lot when I realized that I missed hugs. So yes, I ultimately, um, what creates the goodness, in ourselves, and what's contagious in a good way is a sense of comfort and being able to connect positively in a good way. We can't deny that. It always comes full circle and always goes back to that. you know and I think that's what you should keep most people going, is feeling connected to something bigger than us. And I think that's why we do what we do and why we talk about all these things we talk about, because there is something we recognize and acknowledge, that there is something bigger than us, and we want to help spread um, that word and that hope and that encouragement.
I think there's a good phrase that if you want to change the world, you should start from yourself, within yourself,
Yes,
in yourself. Yeah.
yes, yeah.
So
I think
start
I think
making
that's
steps
Gandhi.
towards.
Yeah, be the change that you want to see in the world. Yes, fuck
Yeah,
yeah.
changes
Cheers to
begins
that.
with you, or you can just join Point News, as we also trying to change the world for the better.
Yeah, and that's why I don't blame people for being scared of change. It could be uncomfortable. It's a huge paradigm shift. I think most people don't want to face the fact that maybe some of the beliefs that they grew up on might have been wrong.
Yeah,
You know, it's those ugly truths. Um, but that's the light at the end of the tunnel, is realizing that change is good when you can embrace it, right? Like Brene Brown, um, when you brave the wilderness, a lot of inventors, a lot of voyagers, and a lot of innovative problem solving things that were thought to be so crazy came from changing something, right? Um, so it is taking that leap of faith as well, trusting yourself and learning to trust others. That's the biggest thing that we have, biggest challenge in humanity, is being able to trust ourselves, but mostly being able to trust other people.
yeah, I agree. Thank you so much for this delightful conversation, Channy. It was nice to meet you.
Thanks for having me. Like, aside from my lighting, I hope that the audio is good at least,
Yeah,
and people will
everything's
listen.
well. Thanks.
Yeah. I appreciate you. Stay
Bye.
blessed and stay passionate.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.